This is episode number 43, featuring artist Bryan Mark Taylor. Welcome to the PleinAir Podcast from PleinAir Magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. And in the PleinAir Podcast, we dive into the world of outdoor painting called plein air painting, which essentially means outdoors in French. The French say plein air, others say plein air, but no matter how you say it, there's a huge movement of artists around the world going outdoors to paint, and this show is about that movement. This week's podcast is brought to you by the PleinAir Convention, the largest gathering of plein air artists in history, coming up very, very soon. If you go to pleinairconvention.com, you can see all of the instructors. We've got well over 80. It starts on April 24th, and even earlier if you're coming to our pre-convention workshops. And there may be space or it may be sold out depending on when you're listening to this. But if not, if it's sold out, get on the waiting list just in case at the last minute you can come. But don't just show up. Last year, we had people show up and they couldn't get in because they thought they could. So you don't want to do that. But anyway, it is very exciting. It's the week I look forward to all year, and it's a pretty incredible event. The PleinAir Convention. Go to pleinairconvention.com. It is also sponsored by a brand new conference, finally a conference just for figurative painters, people who like to do the figure and the face. It's called the Face Conference. Yes, the Face Conference. It's Figurative Art Convention and Expo, and it's brand new. It's going to be in Miami in November 7th to 11th. Just remember 7-11. November 7th to 11th at the historic Biltmore Hotel, and it's very much like the PleinAir Convention. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's hands-on, and the instructors are more figurative and drawing instructors related to the figure and the face. Jacob Collins, Max Ginsberg, Juliet Aristides, Daniel Graves, David LaFell, Stephen Assail, Sherry McGraw, Jeremy Lipking, Graydon Parrish, Jordan Sakal, John Coleman, Cesar Santos, and that's just for starters. Learn more at thefigurativeartconvention.com. Well, let's get right to our interview with Bryan Mark Taylor. Well, we have Bryan Mark Taylor on the line. Bryan, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm excited about this because you're such a multi-dimensional guy. There's so much to learn from you. You're a brilliant artist. You're an entrepreneur. You have developed your own easel. You're a researcher. You've got a DVD out on how artists learn and how they think and how they grow. You're a great family man. This is going to be fun.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Eric.
Did I miss anything? Is there something else you're doing that I don't know about?
Well, there's lots of things that I do, but that's enough we can talk about.
So you and I met, I think it's been, 15 years ago?
Yeah, basically, I think when you started PleinAir Magazine.
Well, it may have been. It may have even been before that, because I think we went painting together one time.
That's right.
Before I started the magazine.
Yeah, that's right. I think with Charles White.
That's right. And then I remember one time you came over to the house. You brought about a 24 by 30.
Oh, that's right. I have forgotten that.
I wish you would have just left it there.
Yeah, I should have.
So let's kind of start from the beginning. How did this whole art thing happen for you?
Let's see. Well, when I was about 8 years old, I was driving home from Idaho. I grew up in northern Utah, and with my dad, and he was really into Brian Tracy, he's a motivational speaker. He's been doing it for many years.
Sure.
My dad, it kind of was transformative to my dad. He'd never heard anything like that, growing up in a farm, stuff like that, but it really made a difference in his life. He's become one of the world's best cosmetic laser surgeons. But anyway, he was all very goal driven and very type A, and he would force us to listen to this stuff when we go on long drives. But anyway, he stopped at one point and said, "Hey, if you could be anything you wanted in your life, what would it be?" And I told him I wanted to be an artist, and kind of blew his mind. He had no idea that that's something that I really enjoyed. I was one of 8 kids and in the middle, so it's hard to keep tabs on everybody's interests. So he was quite surprised. But to his credit, to my mom's credit, they enrolled me into an art kind of art school that would be after school, and that really never looked back from that moment. Really, I just loved it. Every aspect of it, and so many different kinds of art that I've been interested in over the years. But I think the landscape has been my love in particular. Painting outdoors because of my love of the outdoors. I was an avid fly fisherman as a kid. Nowadays, the best light is during the best fly fishing time. So I pick painting over fishing. So not as good as I was back then. But
right.
There's only.
I've been racking my brain for years, and you just said something that made it all come together. I always talk about how you always maintain this young, youthful look, and now I've got it figured out. Your dad is a laser cosmetic surgeon.
Right.
Ah.
That's right.
All right. Well, I think I'll be calling him soon, right?
Yeah, one of these days I'll do a workshop, and then people can learn painting and get some laser treatment too, or something like that. We joke about it.
Yeah. Well, you should give them. That would be fun.
Yeah.
So you went through your school years. You got some experience, and then what happened? You ended up obviously getting more and better training. How and where?
So I studied with private teachers all through junior high and high school. Picking up oil painting, acrylic, watercolor. So getting familiar with mediums. The training wasn't that great in those kind of early years. It was adequate, I guess. In high school, like my high school teacher, he basically just let me do whatever I wanted to do because he just couldn't teach to the level that I wanted to learn at. So I just kind of was figuring some things out myself. It's not like today where we get exposed to so many resources and stuff. That's why I'm blown away by some of these young kids. They're able to be exposed by, great painters such an early age. It was a little tougher back then.
We have a young man who is, I believe, 17, coming to the PleinAir convention, and we're actually putting him on the demo stage. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to give him encouragement. His name is Kyle Ma.
Sure. Yeah.
And he was trained by a friend of mine here in Austin, and he's really a spectacular painter for a 17-year-old.
Yes,
and quite frankly, way beyond his years. And so, I think that's really important to give these people encouragement. And yes, when you think about all the materials that are available, even when I wanted to learn art, there just was nothing out there. And, that all of this has really blossomed in the last, 10, 15, 20 years in terms of the video instruction and all the workshops and all the various sources and, of course, all the online training and so on now. So it's really amazing. A great time to be alive and a great time to be wanting to learn about art.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I envy these young kids that can be exposed to it early on. There's really no reason why you couldn't master just about anything by finding the tribe and starting to learn from the best from that group. And that's also true with PleinAir, with painting in general. I'm an avid consumer of those instructional DVDs and all that stuff as well as anybody. The other thing I think is good is that just the exposure on social media. We can see what people are doing and how they're developing. And that's one of the things that I've tried to harness with, we've done a thing called a Strata 31-day challenge, where we've got large people from all over the world painting every single day and posting, and we've kind of made it into a sort of a marathon or an Ironman, and that, I think that's things like that have really helped to take some of the instruction that I gave in the Master's Mind DVD and kind of put it into practice. And it's been great to see people's progress. They've really gone from a dream to doing shows and all this stuff. It's really been fun to see.
Well, let's talk about the Master's Mind for just a second. For the people who don't know, you were at the PleinAir convention and you were on stage, and you had approached me and said, "Hey, I've got this thing, and it's not doing a painting demo, but it's kind of how people learn." And so we put you on a small stage with it originally, and we had so much feedback on it. I approached you about doing a DVD, and then of course you did it again on the big stage the following year. But you've created a bit of controversy over that as well.
Of course.
Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, I heard from a world famous artist who I won't name. He's a very good friend and a highly respected person who totally disagrees with you because the theory that, and you can articulate this better than I, but the theory is we've all believed what Malcolm Gladwell has said, which is you have to have 10,000 hours at something before you can master it. And you've said, hogwash, you don't need 10,000 hours. You need to approach things in a completely different way. So talk about that.
Sure. There's definitely, hours of practice that goes into mastering something. There's a very big difference between learning something and mastering something. And I think people often forget that. And one of the main things that needs to happen is a sustained focus. And if you focus, and I think Kyle Ma, as a young man, is a great example of that. I've kind of watched him on Facebook as he posts, and the reason why he's gotten to where he has at such a young age is he's been, for a young man, exceptionally. He's very focused on what he's after, and he's able to kind of shorten that time of kind of wandering around, of trying this and that. And what happens if we keep experimenting and never kind of doing a deep dive into kind of a more narrow domain, we lengthen the time that we master anything. And I think a lot of people maybe may feel that way. They could be a jack of all trades, but in terms of mastering something, they may have not got there in any field. And so basically the premise behind the Master's Mind is that if we focus on just a few things, what we do is we can shorten that time. Basically the things that really matter in terms of representational art, let's
give me an example of that. So let's say that I want to learn how to paint eyeballs.
Right. Well, and so that's something where you are going to find the master. There's lots of ways to paint eyeballs, or different artists, right? There's more abstract kind of ways of handling paint, or more like Sargent, stuff like that. Say you pick Sargent. So you want to learn how to paint eyeballs like Sargent. Well, you're gonna be doing a bunch of master copies, and then you're going to be painting from life, and you're going to have those master copies right next to you as you are painting from life. And basically you're doing a very focused practice. You're spending a month or a couple of months every single day working on painting eyes. And that's something that people have a hard time doing. Even professional artists, when they want to improve their skill level, they get distracted. They get, by life or other interests, competing interests, and don't really take a deep dive into a particular narrow field. And some of the best, head or portrait painters, they regularly paint from life every day, or at least a couple times a week. They're painting heads, and that's what they need to do. And I'm sure, with your new convention coming up called Face, I think, you see people that do that. They regularly make that a habit so that they can continue to improve and have more rapid improvement. Now, if you're with people taking my workshops or other people's workshops, when they're only painting for a week or two and then they stop, and then maybe another week, a month later, that's why it takes a year, decades to get any growth, if any. You have to have that sustained drive, because the neural network needs to actually physically change. In order to do that, you have to stress it, on a daily basis.
So let's go back to my eyeball example for a second, because I want to make sure I understand that. If so I pick John Singer Sargent and I copy an eyeball from one of his paintings, and I copy that over and over and over and over and over and over again. But what if I'm doing it badly? Am I not just giving myself training and doing it badly?
Absolutely. You can actually make things worse, right? That's where a coach comes in. You need to have somebody that you regularly meet with, or that gives you that critique or that feedback. And so that's an important component in this whole thing, is that you have somebody that can point out your flaw, or the thing you're not doing well, so you can make that correction.
Yeah, I would think so, because we all get so close to the work that we're working on. It's sometimes difficult to see that our perspective is wrong, or our drawing is off, or that our values are wrong, or edges are wrong, or whatever.
Correct. So, for example, I do have a couple people that I'm working with on a weekly basis. I have them report to me. They send me basically an email with work they've done that week, and then we talk for about 30 minutes each week about what they need to improve, things that are incorrect. I can make these suggestions, and then I give an assignment, work on this. So, example, I just talked with one of the people I'm working with about how to effectively communicate hair, and we talked a lot about using a straight line technique to get the structure of the hair, the sculpture of the hair, before you create the texture. And so I gave him an assignment based on that. So that's really important. You have to really have somebody that you trust, that can give you very practical and feedback on a week-to-week basis. Really, you need at least a week between critique sessions or whatever, so that you can have enough time to implement whatever was said the week before.
So my understanding, this is called chunk learning.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I saw an example of this, and I just want to say this to kind of reiterate the concept, because I play guitar, and I'm trying to learn to play guitar better. And so rather than tackling a whole song, for instance, you tackle one measure of a song, or maybe two measures at a song, and you do that slowly and practice it perfectly. So you don't try to be in any hurry. You go through and you play the sound, and you play the one note, and then the next note, and then the next note, and the next note, and you try to get it done perfectly in slow speed. And then once you've got it perfectly in slow speed, then you go up to the next level and speed it up, and then you do it again and again and again. And then once you've got that one down, then you move to the next measure, and you do that same thing again. And then you combine the two measures, and you practice those perfectly. Is that articulating
Yes,
essentially
absolutely.
The concept?
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is, we get we get impatient, and so we want to race through the whole song, and that's something that will cause you to learn things slower, because the mind has two sets of memory. One is short-term memory, one's long-term memory, and if we have to do that repetitive process to convert things from short-term to long-term memory. If we don't do it that way, it's just going to be a lot longer a process to master something, because it's not converted to long-term memory. It goes into a different part of the brain, embedded in a very almost miraculous and wonderful way in the tissues of the brain. But once it's there, it's a different thing. It allows you to listen to music and still paint without, you don't have to think about it in the same way. It can be automatic almost once it's in that deep tissue.
Now, what about this? What about the subconscious mind, which I assume is a different form of memory? Can you hypnotize somebody and teach them to paint?
No. As far as the mastery goes, I haven't seen anything that would say that you could convince somebody that you could make them believe that they could paint really well. But as far as hypnosis goes, I haven't seen it work with athletes or anything like that. It could reduce some fears and things like that, but in terms of acting in perfect ways or getting you in the zone or something like that, I'm kind of skeptical of any of those claims.
Yeah, well, they've now debunked the whole idea of sleep learning.
Yeah.
Of course, you can't sleep learn to paint, can you?
Yeah, it takes a conscious effort, and it's hard. Just like lifting weights. And I think that's one of the reasons why people give up. And there's always room at the top, I guess, because I believe this is the easiest and fastest way to learn, but it's still very hard.
Well, I remember when I was a kid and I was trying to learn piano or organ or something. I hated piano because the teacher would just make us go through these, the chords and the routine, the whatever they call them, the scales.
Sure.
And I felt that I wanted to learn a song, right? Because you don't want to learn the chords, you want to learn a song, so you have this sense of progress.
Right.
And I kind of feel like to some extent the same is true in painting. Is if somebody's new at painting, they need a sense of accomplishment. They need something they can show off. They need something they can say, hey, I did that. And they need to have created a painting. And my fear is that you get an entry-level student going into this chunk learning thing, you're going to have the same kind of a turnoff as scales. So
Yeah.
Is there a fine balance? You taught at the Art Academy for years. They probably taught their teachers how to teach. What did you learn about that?
Well, there's definitely a motivational part, and I know some thinkers have called it ignition, getting somebody inspired. And so you have to think of it, I guess you can think of it in terms of percentages. And, there's always a certain portion, and I would say it's got to be a large portion, at least 50% where you're learning. But there's also the other half where you're working on inspiring projects, right, where you're actually performing. So much like, for example, for you, you want to do, if you're at the band level now, or, you have your weekend gigs or whatever, but you still need to have that, the balance between practice time and your performance time. So I'm practicing what I preach. I do a lot of practice time along with all the gallery obligations and things that I have for my work, so that I can, I do final finished paintings, and then I do, I have stacks and stacks of stuff that I'm studying and working on.
What are you working on? Because you're already a master. So what do you need to work on?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. I know some people have probably seen I've been posting a few science fiction types of paintings. So basically, I'm able to discover more what's in my head in terms of the shapes and my understanding of the various elements of lighting and stuff like that by what I can make up. And so I'm right now I'm trying to push the limits of my memory by doing things from memory, by doing things out of my head, and things that I don't quite understand, I will then go and specifically study those things. And I think that's enhanced my ability to manipulate whatever I'm seeing to my own ends. So it's not just about, at a certain point you say, okay, I can copy that thing, whatever, or that scene or whatever. But now I want to go beyond that and really say something about that scene. And so you're really testing your ability to move things around, change values, change colors, add things that maybe aren't in there. That's kind of where my interest is right now.
Well, DaVinci was big on memory training.
Yes, yeah, and I think he got to that point as well, where he had a very sharp ability to observe, and then you could get kind of complacent and bored, but DaVinci was that mind that wanted to push things, started to push things further into kind of celestial realms or intellectual realms, and I think that's my current interest right now is going beyond what I'm seeing.
Talk to me a little bit about lifelong learning. I wrote an email today that I was talking about a large number of people who are coming into painting who want to be ready to be professionals. They want to be in the shows. They want to be in the paint outs. They want to be in the galleries, and yet a lot of them have not really developed their work to the level that they maybe should. And and in that, I talked about the consummate professionals that I've met in my life who are always trying to elevate themselves. For instance, you look at somebody like George Carlson, who is just an absolutely amazing painter, and he's getting absolutely giant amounts of money for his paintings. And yet he hasn't been painting that long. I think he started out as a painter, then he went to sculpting, and then when sculpting got to be, a little bit more difficult, he went back to painting, and I think he's only been painting for 10 years or something. And yet he told me that he's constantly going to other painters and constantly studying and constantly growing. And yet I think there's this sense that once you've gotten to a certain place, that you really don't need to do that. So talk to me about learning from the perspective of always elevating yourself and always pushing yourself to get to the next level, even if you're at the highest of high levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And George, I think, is an excellent example. If you talk to that guy, he's always got paint in his pocket or something like that. So in 10 years or whatever, he is constantly thinking about it, over dinner or whatever. He'll pull out some paints and start mixing them together. And that's really just this total and complete obsession over learning new things, and not just learning and trying stuff, but also, like I said, doing the mastery part of it too. So there's two components. There's definitely you kind of go broad, you cast a broad net over things, and then you have to prove all things and hold on to the stuff that you really like. and kind of incorporate that, into your work. And it, I kind of have certain percentages of time where I do kind of cast the broad net over things, and then kind of put up a series of exercises of things. So, for example, I've actually been in clay building some models of things, and I've been painting those models as I've kind of, built these little kind of sets and stuff like that in order to explore certain things.
Well, that's what Maxfield Parrish did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he went out and he built these houses and trees and I think he went to the train people and got some trees and added foliage and things, and then he would light them. He'd put a background in them. He'd put a moon in them, and then he would paint them.
Yeah. Well, I cheat a little bit. I use a 3D printer, so it's a little easier for me. But it's it's definitely those kinds of things you can break new ground by using unconventional materials and ideas to get to new areas.
Well, that brings up a whole nother discussion, I suppose, and that is that there's kind of two schools of thought. The one school of thought is do things the way that they did things 100 or 400 years ago, and go through the extensive process, making sure you understand it, know it, learn to draw, learn to paint from life, draw from life. Don't ever use photographs, etc. And so you have this this one group of people who's like, no, we never use technology. And then you look back and a lot of people use technology. Bouguereau was using photographs to some extent because it was coming around at that time. So right. Are you in one particular school or another?
Well, I don't treat. I know people have some almost religious feelings about only paint from life and very traditional sort of thing. I do not feel that way at all. I embrace technology. I love innovation in that regard, and I'm very much interested in a part of the space age, and so. I think whatever tools at your disposal to learn, I think they can definitely be of help, and just always recognizing their tools and not as shortcuts or crutches. I think use whatever you've got.
Do you ever use photographs in your work?
Yeah, definitely. I know how to use Photoshop and all of that. I've learned some things from I had an opportunity to meet with all these artists from the film industry, and we rented a big house down in San Diego and got together and learning all kinds of different things and about how the film industry, all the tricks and different things they use, and it's incredibly sophisticated software and stuff like that. But there's still the same principles of design, no matter what you do. But there's also different things that you can do to get you to different results. And I think if we want to continue to push the boundaries of art and continue to make it interesting, relevant, and viable, I think being open to all of that stuff is, at least for me, is what keeps me excited.
Well, it's interesting. I know you and I have one thing in common, and that is a year ago I took a group of people to Cuba. You just got back from Cuba this week.
Yeah.
And you get into a situation like that where if you painted, a couple of 2 or 3 hour paintings every day, or you tried to paint everything, you couldn't paint everything. And so there are certain things that, you want to capture with a photograph because you can't get around to everywhere, or you can't get around to everywhere with your easel. And so that that
Yeah.
would, I guess, would be a good argument for photography. Yet I know many artists who just insist they won't do it no matter what. They'll do sketches,
Yeah.
but won't do photography.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of purity. I think it's something that's in our nature to want to be a purist, and so my hats off to him. It's just not my thing. I think I'm open to any and every sort of kind of branch of learning, and I just don't buy into the whole purity thing.
Well, I think that certainly I'm not critical of it. I think, everybody's got to do their own thing and everybody's got to find their own way. I will say that, what matters is what the output is, and that's one of the great arguments for plein air work is that if you paint from photographs all the time and you're not getting outdoors, your paintings are going to look like photographs with blown out skies and dark shadows and the drawing slightly being off and perspective being a little bit off and so on. And yet if you paint outdoors as much as somebody like you does, then you can fool the viewer because that tree isn't going to be that dark or that shadow isn't going to be that dark or that light isn't going to be blowing out the sky as much as it shows up in the photo.
You need to constantly go back and forth. And, for me, travel is really stimulating. I've been to Europe and China and, Cuba and different places just in the last several months. And travel is something that definitely stimulates me. But I want to, go out there and experience it, but then I need to come home and kind of really digest it. And if I just left it at that point, it would become a superficial understanding of that experience if I don't go home and really look at some of the images. Look at, I put all my studies that I did on the trip up, so I have that and have the true color palette that I captured there, but then I combine it with, I need that time to fully digest the experience. And I think John Stern has talked a lot about that, where, the plein air part is, half of the cycle. The big studio paintings are kind of the full fruition of those initial efforts. And so, I find that having the studies plus the photo reference is something that brings things into that kind of complete, fully fleshed out idea.
Go ahead.
And Tim Lawson talked about that in a prior plein air convention. He talked about refinement of thought, and he showed some examples of artists doing the plein air study and then going and doing a deep dive into it. And Tim, when he's a slow painter, there's no way he could paint any of those masterful paintings just on location. He needs that time to digest it in the studio.
Well, same with George.
George is the same way, right?
Yeah.
And we want to see those big, impressive paintings. And ultimately, I think often we're judged on those big final pieces. Those tend to be the ones that go to the museums and stuff. For example, we have an exhibit in Salt Lake, me and two other artists, Josh Clare, John Burton. I have a painting there that's 90 inches by 72 inches. I'm not going to do that on location, especially in a remote place in Wyoming. But to be able to complete that, I need to be doing that in the studio, and just that's how it has to be.
So you just got back from Cuba, but a few weeks earlier you were in China.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. This is a luxury problem. A friend of mine calls this a luxury problem, and that is, for instance, I travel a lot. I take a lot of groups around the world, and we paint together. And so, I was over in Italy, and I was all excited about doing Italy paintings. I did all these studies, and I came back and I did a big studio piece on Italy. And then next thing you know, I'm on the plane for New Zealand, and now I'm all excited about New Zealand after coming back from that and having all those studies. And I've completely forgotten about Italy, and I've completely forgotten about France, the trip before that. And completely forgotten about Cuba, the trip before that. Do you run into the same kind of thing? Do you find yourself kind of concentrating on what's been most recent, or are you able to kind of go back and pull yourself back into those different places that you've traveled?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to some degree, yeah, you do get you are the most excited about the last thing you did see. Um, I guess I do find myself returning to places again and again. So I kind of, in a way, commit to some areas, like Italy, for instance, since I speak Italian and know the country very well. I've been back many times, and so I try and go back to these places. I'm going to go to China again, in the fall. Really fell in love with China while there, and it's fun to see. I was there with Kevin McPherson and other artists. It's fun to see how excited Kevin is about China, learning Chinese, and he's like half Chinese now. It's amazing, but yeah, you can get a little bit scattered too if you to a certain degree have to kind of again not get drawn away by every little every place you go and stuff like that, which is hard, but kind of focus on some things. And one of the things I do that I love painting things that are very bohemian, very kind of fallen apart, and I don't want to say junky, but things that are old. Yeah, old and complex, and so whether it's in China or Cuba, there's certain things that I'm interested in, and so that's how I kind of continue this whole thread of regardless of the country or place that I'm in, is that I know that I'm interested in certain things, and those are the things I tend to focus on more, and so there's more continuity.
Let's talk a little bit about plein air painting, since this is the PleinAir Podcast.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of other things. You developed a plein air easel called the Strata easel. You've now got 3 different versions that I'm aware of, and probably more to come. What prompted all that?
Well, the easel that I had, and I won't name it, but it fell apart. Several. Let's see. I don't know how long it's been now. Maybe 7 years ago. Fell apart, and I was looking for another easel. Because I travel so much, and TSA is never kind to your bag. They throw it around, and I wanted something that was kind of bulletproof. And at that time, that's when Steve Jobs was going through his cancer treatment, and the biography came out. He was kind of on his last days, and I remember going through that biography, and just really resonated with me in terms of the way he saw designing products. And so, and part of that's my interest in lifelong learning. I've loved entrepreneurship ever since I was little. I've only worked for another person for a couple of months back in high school, and the rest, it's always been kind of doing my own thing. So I'm always interested in entrepreneurs and that sort of thing. So Steve Jobs is one of them, and he, I was like, I can design something where it has this kind of functionality and simplicity that's not in the market, and so that's what I was able to do, and basically taught myself this whole kind of industry through learning, reading different things about design, about setting up a business, and automating things so that it's efficient, and quality control, all that stuff, and patents, and I filed my the provisional patent. I just read a book and did it in 24 hours, and then figured all this stuff out, and it was actually just a very fun thing to do. And I kind of do it while I'm painting. I read or I listen to Audible while I'm painting, so it doesn't take away from my painting time, but it kind of adds to the richness of the day. And if I do a bad painting, at least I learned something in a book.
So you do a lot of workshops, you do a lot of teaching. you are certainly right up there in terms of one of the better painters out there. You probably have some principles that you try to instill in your students. What are those principles?
Well, we do definitely go over the things that I talk about in the Master's Mind DVD, where we are working on breaking things down from the big complex idea into ways of studying nature directly in a way that can be both engaging, but also can help you kind of find your voice and find your focus really, and so that you can get to where you want to go faster. And I think that's a big part, is when I talk to people initially, they have a very fuzzy and vague idea of how to get to that voice where you're saying something. And there's a lot of wandering that goes on in terms of, well, I don't know what I'm interested in, is kind of what a lot of people are saying. So what I try and do is try and help them find that focus by the observations that I make on their work. And I can see whether, and it's kind of a subconscious thing of what they kind of tend to focus on and what their strengths are. And so what I'm trying to do is help them realize where their strengths lie and how to kind of grow that area, and use that as kind of your first stake in the ground as you're trying to pitch that tent. And so that's really what I'm trying to do with each individual person, trying to coach them with, and then building a set of exercises around kind of that core. If somebody's interested in like cityscape, then we talk a lot about 1-point perspective and how to develop that space, or 2-point perspective, stuff like that. Or if somebody's more interested in nature and trees and that sort of thing, he's really focusing on developing an understanding of how to paint trees and foliage and grasses and different things like that. So it just depends on kind of what they're interested in, and I kind of build it around that.
You have any particular advice for somebody who might not have the privilege of studying under you, that perhaps is picking up painting? I am discovering every day new people who are picking up plein air painting as a result of discovering the podcast. And continually run into people. I ran into people the other day who told me that they started painting because they stumbled into the podcast. So what do you recommend to them as a starting point, other than buying the Master's Mind DVD and your DVD on how to paint? How do you go beyond that?
Well, I think really getting, we have this ability and opportunity to get together with people and that tribe. And, the plein air convention is a great way to do that, or taking a workshop to just get some hands-on feedback. I do have a lady that she was so nervous. She took my workshop a couple years ago, and so nervous she couldn't sleep the first night. And I was up early, and she was up early, kind of wandering around. We were on this property with all these houses on it, and so I just talked to her a little bit and said, "Hey, we're just going to jump in, and it's going to be okay." And she totally did. Just jumped in, and now she just recently had a show of her work 4 years later, I think 4 or 5, and it's really exciting to see her go from totally scared to having a show in a matter of 4 or 5 years. So I think really you have to, whether it's getting the DVDs or things like that, or jumping in and meeting face to face with people, which I do recommend. I think you gotta see it in person, I think, to a degree, to and start having those conversations in order to bridge that gap and really get excited about it. that's just kind of human nature. We get influenced by the people we hang around with, and so taking every opportunity that you can to, get close to those artists and things that inspire you and got you interested in the first place.
I was writing today in that same piece I referred to. I was writing about the PleinAir convention and how I wished it had existed when I first decided I wanted to learn how to paint, because I chased a lot of things that I didn't know if they were good or they weren't good when I first started learning to paint. And had I been able to go to something like that, sample 50, 60 different painters, 80 different painters, and watch them paint, see how they do it, find a style that I wanted to learn, find somebody I wanted to study under, and to be able to see it in person and live, to see it kind of sink in. I think it's a bit overwhelming in one way, but at the same time, it's a chance to go, wow, there's like 300 different approaches to the same thing. And I think that's wonderful. One final thing I'm curious about, and I think I know the answer from your perspective, and I think I've said this on the podcast probably far too many times before, but when I'm out painting, inevitably somebody walks up to me and says, gee, I wish I could do that. I wish I had the talent. And I always say to them, this is not about talent. This is about practice. This is about learning a process and practicing it. And anybody who can have some kind of decent hand-eye coordination can pretty much do this. And you can learn hand-eye coordination if you don't have it.
Yeah,
do you believe that? Do you believe in talent, or do you believe in, that talent is a born thing, or do you believe this is about being a learned skill?
No, it's definitely, I mean, if infants could, paint, masterpieces, then it's an inborn talent. Clearly, even using a spoon, baby has to learn that ability, or, like chopsticks. A baby from China that I noticed, they have these little chopsticks training chopsticks, which was fascinating to me. And I'm trying to use chopsticks. I can barely use them, but if, I practice, I could use it. It's the same kind of thing, with that, and with anything else. So through the research that I've looked at, I believe less and less in this kind of idea of talent, and more and more into that, practicing. Also, just that desire to do it. It's rare to find any artist that hasn't put a whole lot of time in it, including you look at Kyle Ma. He has been painting like crazy, and it's not like it just all magically happened immediately. He's just put in a lot of hours.
Yeah.
Started younger.
Yeah.
And I think there's no reason why, if kids, and with my kids too, if they started, at age 5, they could learn quite a bit, with just a couple years of practice.
I was at a dinner party one time with Fred Ross's house, Fred Ross from the Art Renewal Center. And I don't remember the names of some of the people that were around the table, but there were several people. And we got into this big discussion. And one of the artists said, you cannot become a master unless you start when you're about 15 or 20 years old, and you need a lifetime to do it. You've pretty much proven that wrong.
Well, I agree that it is harder when you get older. Okay, so I mean, the mind changes a little bit, slows down, but I don't, if you have that focus and that concentration, you can get there, just as well. The mind doesn't, it's more plastic than people thought. And so I think that idea is an older one, because of that belief that the mind, the idea of neuroplasticity doesn't exist after the age of 10 or whatever. But that's shown that that's not true. There's many studies that talk about it. It's one of the reasons why people after going through a stroke can still rehabilitate. themselves and get a function on the other half of their body, even after something as traumatic as that at advanced ages. So I think we're learning a lot more about neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, ways to tap into the mind and let it build that new circuitry.
Well, and there's also evidence that the mind will accomplish amazing things if there's passion behind it.
Oh, yeah, of course. And it's just that sustained effort. You're taking something from short-term memory to long-term memory. And they've worked with people that can memorize numbers, like 400 numbers, after just hearing them in rapid succession. They can repeat back like 400 numbers. In succession. It's incredible. And they're doing this as adults. So and of course that's with a lot of specific training. I think a lot of people, it's just a way to be lazy, to say, well, I'm too old and I can't do it.
Right.
And that's what we do.
Yes, and that's something we should never tell ourselves.
Absolutely. It's the worst. It's really the worst mindset. And I hate having, I teach a youth group of scouts. I got roped into scouting. And so anyway, this one young man, we were learning to tie knots, and he's like, I just don't tie, I'm good at basketball, but I can't tie knots. And I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You can definitely tie knots. It's just whatever we practice, we're good at. So yeah, absolute worst thing we could ever tell ourselves is I'm not good at X.
Right.
I think that's just a lazy thing to say.
Well, I think we also have to manage, you have to manage what you say and what you think, because our reptilian brains are designed to protect us.
Yes.
And so the negative thoughts that enter our heads are our reptilian brains saying, no, you want to be safe. And you have to push that stuff aside. You can't tell yourself you're getting old. You can't tell yourself. I corrected somebody at dinner last night. They said, such and such is killing me. And I said, don't use those words. I remember a friend of mine, she was using those words, and I was on the phone call with her, and I said, stop using those words. And she said, oh, that's BS. This is nonsense. I can use those words. It's not going to hurt me. And then she died the next day. So I think the subconscious mind is so powerful, and we don't realize how powerful it is. And I think if we tell ourselves we're old, then it's going to affect everything we do. But we tell ourselves that we have the ability to learn, we have the time, we have the energy, that we're going to conquer something. I think you can do it. There may be limits to that, once certain health problems have set in or something, but I think that we have to be very careful about that.
Right. And that's, I think it's all about, we have that one life to live. And let's take it right to the edge of what we can do. I think, in a prior DVD that we did painting cityscapes, I said Michelangelo was my favorite artist. I want to change that now. I think DaVinci is more my kind of hero in the way that he, his diversity of interest. He was interested in everything and passionately curious and a learner. The end. Not that Michelangelo wasn't, but Da Vinci just had that broad ability to be passionate, interested in things. And I think in this day and age, when everything's at our fingertips, there's no reason why we shouldn't be absolutely energized into learning whatever it is we're interested in.
Absolutely. So you've done a lot. You've become a highly accomplished master painter. You've taught at one of the great art schools in America. You have created your own series of easels. You've done painting DVDs, and you've come up with new research about artists for the Master's Mind DVD. Let's see. What's next?
Well, I do have some big projects and things that I'm working on. I'm interested in, again, I mentioned kind of the science fiction sort of realm, and so I have some things in regards to that that I'm kind of interested in. So there will be some new surprises coming up this year that will be fun to showcase.
All right, outstanding. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for your time today. You're an inspiration to us all, and I want to acknowledge you for all that you've done for the art community, for the PleinAir community. You've inspired many tens of thousands of artists, and you continue to inspire me, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that, and it's been great knowing you all these years, and I appreciate what you're doing for artists, and kind of consolidating the tribe and getting them all together. That's a big effort, and I think I commend you for doing that.
Well, thank you. Well, thanks again to Bryan Mark Taylor. This guy has got a lot of ideas. He's a fascinating man. He got his fingers in a lot of things. Sponsored by the PleinAir Convention, held this coming April. I know it's April already, but it's coming up to the end of the month. You want to get there, San Diego, PleinAirConvention.com. But make sure you go there and register in advance. There may be a seat left. It's hard to know by the time you're listening to this, but it's a very cool thing. Today's interview was also sponsored by the brand new Figurative Art Convention and Expo, FACE, and that's going to be held at the Biltmore Hotel November 7 to 11. Remember, 7-11 in November in Miami. Learn more at figurativeartconvention.com. Well, the PleinAir movement is red hot, which may be why the PleinAir magazine is the top representational art magazine sold at Barnes & Noble nationwide. Drop by, pick one up, or get your own subscription at pleinairmagazine.com. This is always fun to do. I always enjoy these interviews. Bryan was fascinating, wasn't he? Wow, got a lot going on. Anyway, I'm Eric Rhoads. I'm the publisher and the founder of PleinAir Magazine. Remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it, and I will see you at the PleinAir Convention. This is exciting. It's an exciting time for me. We'll see you. Bye-bye.